Russia's attack in Ukraine could dramatically change the balance between the world's three largest powers. But what's China's role in the crisis? How does the United States view China's threat? In his State of the Union, President Biden mentioned China twice. And at the same time, a U.S. delegation is visiting Taiwan, reaffirming America's commitment to the island. And for those watching our full episode, the Chinese Communist regime has announced major plans for its space activities this year, and they're more ambitious than ever before. But what's Beijing's goal? And another human trafficking case triggers outrage in China. One man's live streaming hobby exposed the story of one mother of two locked in a cage by her husband. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Is a new order of the world just being built? Could Russia's military attack on Ukraine be the start of a dramatic change to the balance between the world's three leading powers? And could that disturbance threaten the U.S.'s dominance in the world order? This kind of powerful change has been quietly creeping into play for some time. But until a week ago, it was happening gradually. For instance, Russia can now turn off the lights in Europe at will, as it's become a critical gas supplier to Europe. Likewise, China could cause a mass personal protective equipment or PPE shortage across the entire Western world amid the pandemic, because China is the globe's manufacturing powerhouse and the second most powerful economy in the world. China also has a rapidly expanding military and is stepping up threats on Taiwan and its neighbors in the South China Sea. And on top of that, Russia and China have built a partnership, though it's largely based on shared interests instead of values.
An interesting history, but they really fill each other's gaps like a puzzle piece, right? Demographically, space, tech, cyber, natural resources.
The challenges facing the United States and the rest of the democratic world right now are much different than those during the Cold War. The current economic links between many of these nations didn't exist decades ago. And China, as Russia's partner, had been at the brink of economic collapse after numerous political campaigns launched by the Communist Party. Only in the 80s did China start to thrive. How important is the China issue to the U.S.? There are a few different sides to the story. First, the U.S.'s presidential traditional address to Congress, State of the Union. Biden used his one-hour speech on Tuesday to announce a ban on Russian airlines flying over the U.S. He mentioned China twice during his remarks. The first time when he was thanking Congress for passing the infrastructure bill.
It's going to transform America, to put us on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century that we face with the rest of the world, particularly China. I've told Xi Jinping it's never been a good bet to bet against the American people.
That bill has been signed into law, and it will invest over $500 billion into America's infrastructure. The funding will target broadband networks, bridges, and roads. The second and third China mentions came when the president mentioned another bill, the Bipartisan Innovation Act.
To compete for the jobs of the future, we also need a level playing field with China and other competitors. That's why it's so important to pass the Bipartisan Innovation Act sitting in Congress that will make record investments in emerging technologies and American manufacturing. We used to invest almost 2% of our GDP in research and development. We don't now. China is.
The Innovation and Competition Act seeks to give the U.S. an edge in competition with China. It includes over $200 billion of funding for scientific research and manufacturing semiconductors, more commonly known as microchips. Along that line, the U.S. military is expressing concerns. In the face of Russia's war on Ukraine, commanders from the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and Space Force testified on Tuesday before the Strategic Forces Subcommittee. Their fear Washington's ability to maintain nuclear deterrence. That's in the context of growing threats from China and Russia. NTD's Arlene Richards has the story.
I have previously emphasized our need to be able to deter two adversaries at the same time That need is now an imperative. I've said this before, and I think it's worth repeating. Every operational plan in the Department of Defense and every other capability we have rests on an assumption that strategic deterrence, and in particular nuclear deterrence, is holding. And if strategic or nuclear deterrence fails, no other plan and no other capability in the Department of Defense will work as designed.
Our competitors, especially Russia and China, are spreading disinformation, actively sowing division and internal discord with the intent to undermine the foundation of our nation, our democracy, and other democracies around the world.
A representative for the Department of Defense said it is urgent to maintain U.S. deterrence.
We must diligently calibrate our strategic posture, which is underwritten by our nuclear missile defense, space, and hypersonic strike capabilities to these developments.
The commanders are poised to execute strategic defense, but they say they need consistent funding to improve their ability to detect threats anywhere in the world. Arlene Richards, NTD News, New York.
And in Taiwan, a delegation of former senior U.S. defense officials met with Taiwan's president Wednesday. The group confirmed that the United States stands firm behind its commitments to Taiwan and its allies in the region.
The United States will continue to oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo and will continue to support a peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues, consistent with the wishes and best interests of the people of Taiwan. I do hope by being here with you, we can reassure you and your people, as well as our allies and partners in the region, that the United States stands firm behind its commitments.
That's from former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mike Mullen. During the visit, he said collaboration between the U.S. and Taiwan is stronger and more expansive than ever before. The U.S. delegation met Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen Thursday as fighting between Russia and Ukraine rages on. Speculation is circulating over whether Taiwan is next on the list for invasion. Beijing claims Taiwan as its own territory, though the island has separate leadership and its own constitution. Taiwan is now on alert in case Beijing tries to use the chaos in Ukraine to make a move on the island. For now, there are no reports of any unusual Chinese activity. Tsai said the U.S. visit demonstrates the rock-solid ties between Taiwan and the United States. She also highlighted the island's role in regional and global security.
Currently, China's military threat to the Taiwan Strait and the region is continually increasing. Whether it is suppressing Taiwan's international space or creating divisions in Taiwan and attacking our people by engaging in cognitive warfare and spreading disinformation, these actions have not stopped for even one day. Despite that, the Taiwanese people has never given up.
Beijing has vowed to bring the island under its control, by force if necessary. It's steadily increased its military, political, and economical pressure on Taiwan to try and force the island to accept Chinese sovereignty. Taiwan has vowed to defend itself if attacked.
As Russia's invasion of Ukraine shakes up the post-World War II world order, one question now poses huge implications for the world order. What is China's role in the crisis? Since the end of the Cold War, the Chinese regime has been trying to portray itself as a responsible player for global peace. Since the war against Ukraine broke out, China has appeared as surprised as everybody else. Chinese diplomats have called on all sides to exercise restraint and even offered to help negotiate a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia due to concerns for civilian casualties. But is the Chinese regime really an innocent third party, as it wants the world to believe?
And I think the Chinese have been complicit. I think they have supported a war criminal in a naked war of aggression against an innocent state.
Ian Easton, senior director at the Project 2049 Institute, shared a similar message on Twitter. He wrote, "The Chinese Communist Party is a collaborator, an enabler, and complicit in the Russian invasion of Ukraine." At first glance, this may seem like an overstatement, but reports from Russia and China suggest he may have a point. The New York Times reported on Wednesday that Chinese officials told their Russian counterparts not to invade Ukraine until after the Beijing Winter Olympics. That's according to an intelligence report cited by the New York Times. And last Friday, the newspaper quoted U.S. officials as saying they shared intelligence about Russia's military actions around Ukraine over the 3 months before the full-on invasion. Washington reportedly asked the Chinese regime to help persuade Russia not to invade. China then brushed off the concerns, but then turned around and told the Russians what U.S. officials had said. Now, as the Russians continue to shell Ukraine facilities, causing civilian deaths, the Chinese regime has announced it will not join other nations in sanctioning Russia. Instead, it will maintain normal trade and financial relations with Russia. That's as China's foreign ministry spokesperson repeatedly blasted the U.S. and its allies for what he called illegal unilateral sanctions against Russia. He also accused the U.S. of being a culprit in the crisis and of heightening tensions, creating panic, and even hyping up the possibility of warfare. The Chinese regime may have also been helping soften the blow of Western sanctions on Russia. The day the full-scale invasion against Ukraine started, the Chinese regime officially confirmed it would open up to Russian wheat imports. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison denounced the regime for throwing Vladimir Putin a lifeline and undermining the sanctions. He described China's action as simply unacceptable. What's more, the Chinese regime also sided with Russia to reject a debate over Ukraine in the UN Human Rights Council. It later abstained from voting on a resolution condemning Russia for the invasion. But the most damning evidence seems to rip off the Chinese Communist Party's mask of innocence once and for all. Ironically, it comes from none other than the Russians themselves. According to a press release from the Russian embassy in China, Putin called Xi Jinping on February 25th, one day after the invasion began. The notice explains the two sides reaffirmed their willingness to further closely coordinate and support each other. They noted that the use of illegal sanctions to achieve the self-interested goals of individual countries must never be allowed. In light of this, the leaders of the two countries emphasized the importance of strengthening bilateral pragmatic cooperation, taking into account the results of their talks in Beijing on February 4th. The release suggests that China's Xi may have already known about the invasion and promised to help Putin soften the sanctions that might come as early as February 4th. Worth noting, the Chinese version of the release leaves out that date. And that's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We are now sharing a shortened version of our program on YouTube. That's after being demonetized for a year. Full episodes can be watched on our website, ntd.com/China-in-focus. You can also find out where to watch us live on cable in your city at ntd.com/TV or on NTD's partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, please click the link down below. Thanks for watching. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you tomorrow.